How's it going, guys? So this is gonna be part 3 and the final part of the neutral core card review. If you haven't been answered to the questions in the description for the core card videos, there's a mega giveaway going on. Make sure you answer the question in the description, because the more answers you get correctly, the higher the chance you can win. And there's huge prizes that we got from a donation that we got to the channel from Nightlight. So make sure you do it. Anyways, let's jump right in. The first card is going to be Jungle Princess. A 5 mana frontline. For 3, they summons 2 1/1 hyenas. This is a pretty good card. I'm gonna put it at 4 stars. It's a pretty good card to have because it's fairly difficult to deal with, and a frontline for 3 is a good stat line. And the 2 extra hyenas, you can buff them. For example, if you play this with a Rebel Quartermaster, it's super good. There's a lot of combos that you can make, and this card is fairly good for that. Then after this we have Atlant Phalanx, which is another Atlantean. So this is a 5 mana 5/4 with frontline. I would argue that this is a bad stat line for this. I'd much rather have this as a 5 mana 4/5 with frontline. So I'm gonna have to put this card in the 2-star category, because for Atlanteans there's much better cards than this to play. Then we have Ilia's Battlethorn, which is going to be a 3-star card. This is the basic stat line for 5 mana cards, which is a 5/6. So yeah, that's it. It's a good card to play. It's fairly hard to get rid of, and for 5 mana it's pretty good. Then we have Iadar Vanguard here. That's going to be a 4-star card, so a really good Iadar card. That even though it has a low stat curve as a 4/4, dealing 2 damage to, it's basically deal 4 damage, but you can divide it between 2 creatures, and that makes it a really good card to be played. So it's definitely a 4-star. Then we have Thaumatic Golem, which at the end of your turn give each other friendly Atlantean +1 strength. So this is a really good card. It's definitely a 4-star card. It's fairly hard to deal with it because it's a 5/7, but it can buff the other Atlanteans pretty wildly if you leave it be and you don't deal with it right away. Then we have Amazon Flanker, summon 2 Amazon Flankers. So I would argue this is a 3/3 type of card. It's an okay card. Basically it's a 6 mana 6/6, all with flank. It might be interesting to play with things like Archmonian Onslaught that buff Amazons, but other than that, it's an okay type of card. Then we have Athena's Conjurer, which is summons a 4/2 Proparian Owl with frontline. Basically this is summons, it's a 2/4, summons a 4/2, it's 6/6 worth of stats for 6 mana, which puts this at 3 stars. It's an okay card. Then after this we have Stormtress, which deals 1 damage to each enemy creature. I would argue that this is a really good card, but the issue is that at 6 mana just dealing 1 damage is not that effective. So I'm gonna have to put this card in the 3-star category, because there's way better cards to be played in this mana slot. Then we have Healing Blade Master, which is actually a 4-star card. This is a really good card to be played, especially because not only does it give you an extra card, but it has Ward, which makes it fairly difficult to be dealt with. And a lot of people run this in the 6 mana slot for their decks, especially if they typically run low on cards. This is a really good stuff to put, because the only way to deal with this is to either use 2 spells or to use a creature, and people generally aren't going to be spending 2 spells to deal with a 5/5 because they want to save it for the big creatures that have ward. So Healing Blade Master typically spends a lot of time on the board, and the way that they kill this generally has to do with the using other creatures to be able to do that. So this card is definitely a 4 stars, and it's really good. Then we have Cyclops Marksman, which is another 4-star card in my opinion. This card's super annoying, especially because it has a lot of health and Twin Strike. So if you don't deal with it, it's gonna be able to wipe your board completely. So as you can trade against 2 or 3 things, and that's basically the value of a board clear for 6 mana, which makes these cards really good for what it does. Then we have Frost, Giant, Deathshot. So this is basically the same as the Ogre Archer, but an upgraded version. For 6 mana 4/5, it's better statted. If it was for 6 mana 4/4, it would be terribly bad. So I'm gonna put this in the 3-star category because it's fairly statted well for what it does and the damage that it provides. Then after this we have Mammon's Stalwart, which is basically effectively 6 mana 5/8. Which is okay. It's not as good as the nature cards, for example, but it's a good card. It's a good frontline type of card. The 3/6 fairly hard to be dealt with, so I'm gonna have to put this card in the 4-star category. Also because the next card, which is Minotaur Phalanx, is also a 4-star card. Even though it doesn't have any specific type of effect, I believe it's a really good type of card to be played at this mana curve, and is super hard for the opponent to deal with it. So I'm gonna also put this at the 4 stars. Then we have Porphyrion, Dread Cyclops, which increases the mana cost of your opponent's card power by 2. This actually is a fairly good card. There's some interesting shenanigans that I have been done to me before, where I get a god power for 0 mana, but this card is fairly good, and especially because a lot of people rely a lot on the god powers, and since this has ward, it's gonna be fairly hard to deal with this. And if you drop this on the board, this card is gonna be super good. So I would argue that this is a 4-star card. The issue is, do you want to run this or other 7 mana cards? That's the issue with these types of high cost cards, is that you typically don't want to run a lot of them in your deck, because then you're gonna completely be losing in the early game. So you will want to have fewer and fewer higher costed cards. So you need to be thinking very well about what you do. Then we have a 5-star card, which is Stoneblade Master. In my opinion, this is super good. Basically for 7 mana you get 10, no, not 10, 9/8 worth of stats, which is really good. And it has Afterlife, which means that this is a really good card that protects you against board clears, because after the board clear, it's going to summon 2 creatures. They're going to have another board clear to be able to deal with this, which makes this card annoying as heck to be able to be dealt with. Then after this we have Void Drake, which deals 2 damage to an enemy creature and 1 damage to each other creature. This is an okay card. The problem is the stat line at 7 mana 7/5 is fairly bad. So I'm gonna have to put this card in the 3-star because I would compare it to, for example, Unchained Drake. And Unchained Drake is a much better option, even though it's a 6/5. It does way more damage concentrated on specific things. Then we have Judge Envoy. Whenever you summon a creature, give it +1/+2. It's basically an upgraded Quartermaster. I would be much happier if this had ward, but I'm still gonna put it in the 4-star category, because if you leave this on the board, it can ramp up super fast. And compared to Rebel Quartermaster, the problem with it is that it's a 1/2 in terms of stats, and it's super easy to deal with it and to kill it. But Judge Envoy, on the other hand, it's not. So you can cheat out a lot of mana in the following turns if you play this well. So I really like this card. Definitely 4 stars. Then we have Planetary Centurion, which is a really good Iether card. If you have another Iether in hand, delve an Iether. So delving is a really powerful type of effect where you can pick the Iether or the card that you want for your specific scenario. So if you're running an Iether deck, this is basically a staple and should be in every Iether deck. This is definitely a 4-star type of card. Then we have Veteran Cataphract at 7 mana, 6/6, give a friendly creature +3/+3. Even though buffing other creatures is pretty good, once you start getting to these high mana curves, like other than 4 or 5 mana, once you start getting to these high mana curves, just playing these types of cards that don't give you any specific immediate advantage other than a small buff or something like that, makes it so that these cards are not that great. So I'm gonna have to put this card in the 3-star category because it's super slow for the amount of mana that you pay for it. While on the other hand, you have, for example, Cyclops Defender, which is a 7 mana 6/10. It also doesn't do anything, but it has frontline, so it has an objective, or it has an effect on the turn you play it, on the opponent's turn. But once you play it and it passes to the opponent's turn, this card is already proving to be useful and things like that. So it's a good card to be able to play and to put a lot of protection on the board. So I would argue that this card would be a 4-star card. Then we have Burnished Bull, which for me is definitely a 3-star card. Compared to the Cyclops Defender, this card, it's the same. It's better than the Veteran Cataphract in terms of raw stats, because the Veteran was 9/9 worth of stats. But the Burnished Bull is higher. The only problem is that once you play it, it's gonna have to wait a turn. And if you're playing these types of gigantic cards, of course that the opponent's gonna use their single target removals to deal with this card. So it makes it so that these types of cards never survive for long. So this definitely has to go into the 3-star category. Then after this we have Laden Euclid Dragon. Gives burn +3 to all enemy creatures, and if you have at least 6 cards, it deals 2 damage to each enemy creature. So for 1/8 mana, it's a good effect. It's not a really good effect for 8 mana, so I would argue that this has to go into the 3-star category, because there's better ways, better options for 8 mana in terms of the effect. The board clear is not good enough. I would do burn 3 and at least deal 3 damage to each enemy creature. Be able to be super good. So definitely 3 stars. Then after this we have Blackguard, which gives +2 health to each other friendly creature. If they have frontline, give them 4 health instead. Unless you're running a frontline type of deck, which is kind of stupid to focus on that. This card's for 8 mana, it's terrible. So even though it has really high stats, you have to understand that cards that at the 8 and 9 mana slot, they have to have really good effects, and they typically need to impact the board right away in order to be viable. If they don't impact the board right away in a big sense, then it's not going to be viable. Even though this impacts the board, the effect's fairly average, and it's not like give every other creature 4 health, for example. So I'm gonna put this in the 3-star category. Then after this we have Alien Elite, which for me is another 4-star card. It's an 8 mana 10/12 with protected and frontline, so it has that immediate effect where on the next turn they have to deal with this first. Typically they would have to use a targeted removal, and if that removal is a damage type removal, then this has protector, which protects it against the initial removal, gives it an extra layer of protection, which makes this card much better than the Cyclops Defender, for example. So, and it's a fairly cheap card to have because it's a rare card. So this card definitely goes into the 4-star category. And finally, to finish, and we're gonna finish on a high note with the neutral cards, we have Echophon, Atlantean Hydra, and this, in my opinion, is the best card in the game. Hands down, better than Avatar of Magic, better than Avatar of War, better than everything else in the game, because it has a huge impact on the board right away. Once you play it, okay, it has protected, so the first trade is free. Then it can trade against 2 creatures, and then on top of that, if the creatures have less than 6 health, this is gonna do overkill and deal damage to the other creatures. After you loses the protected, what it's gonna have is that once you trade the first turn, you trade against 2 creatures, kill 2 big creatures, this is gonna take damage. At the end of the turn, it's gonna regen for 6 every turn. So this card is definitely OP as hell, and it also has ward, which basically 9 mana cards which don't have ward are typically useless. But it's a really good card. It's in any type of control deck. It's in there. And before, when a lot of people didn't have access to the marketplace and you couldn't buy the Atlantean Hydra, only a few people got it in their collections, and the people who had it in their decks had a huge advantage. It's like your win rate jumps like 50% if you had a Hydra and the opponent didn't have it. Unless you're running against Death, which has a lot of ways to deal with things and target removals and things like that. Then if you're not, then Hydra is gonna absolutely be super good. And for example, if you're playing with Death, you can once the Hydra dies, you can bring it back with the Raised Death for 5 mana, and that's just absolutely bonkers. So we're ending on a super high note, where we're giving 5 stars. This is the 5 stars unicorn type of level card, best card in the game by far. So if you don't have it, make sure you get it from the marketplace, even though it's expensive. Get it from the marketplace, because this is gonna be in every deck forever. So unless they block core cards from being played in certain formats, this is definitely gonna be a staple in every control type of deck for the future and of Gods Unchained. Anyways, guys, make sure you smash that like button down below here, and if you answer the question in the description. If you didn't, we're doing a mega giveaway thanks to one of our subscribers and one of our community members donated a Tiet priest board and a disciple board, which are going to be raffled at the end of the core card review to 3 lucky winners that participate in the questions for each of the core card review videos. So anyways, guys, see you guys next time. There's one extra bonus video and you're gonna see it next time. Bye bye. Thanks out.